Apple iPhone X, the internet reacts. When Apple chief Tim Cook declared the iPhone X the biggest leap forward since the first iPhone at his latest launch extravaganza, you couldn't help but wonder if he was referring to its features or its price. With the top-end model costing £1,149, customers are paying a premium to swap their fingerprint sensor for a facial scanner and the ability to make an animated monkey or poo emoji copy their bemused looks. In opting to refer to the Model S10 rather than X, the firm has also thrown its naming convention into a bit of confusion. Will there ever be an iPhone 9, or indeed 9? Of course, that's a problem for another day. And the internet has had plenty else to chew over in the meantime. Cnet. The two biggest questions for me focus on the iPhone X's most daring design change. Ditching the home button will actually make the phone more convenient to use, and will using your face to unlock the phone benefit you, or is it just a workaround? The Verge. The iPhone X may be the most powerful iPhone ever, but compared to almost any other Android flagships, it's hard to pick out a category where it leads the pack, at least on paper when comparing raw specifications. But if Apple has shown one thing time and again with every iPhone generation, it's that optimization of hardware and software matter just as much, if not more. Wall Street Journal. The iPhone X's new design, a 5.8-in, edge-to-edge display has raised hopes that it can reverse Apple's fortunes in China, where sales have fallen 6 straight quarters. Chinese consumers are more influenced by a phone's appearance than consumers in other markets, and Apple had kept the same appearance for 3 years. Bloomberg. A $1,000 iPhone could add as much as 6% to Apple's 2018 earnings per share. But that depends on the iPhone X being a hit, and there's more competition from lower-cost Chinese competitors such as Huawei and Xiaomi, which timed the introduction of their new phones around Apple's launch to attract customers who may be deterred by the iPhone X's price/gear. Apple has crafted a stunning new flagship in a time when existing iPhones were starting to look a little, dare I say, pedestrian in comparison to what Samsung, LG, and others were doing in hardware. The iPhone X has accelerated through and can spar with the best of them. Engadget. What did bother me a little more than expected were the bezels that run around the screen. Given that Apple's competition has done an incredible job trimming the cruft from around their displays, I can't help but feel that the iPhone X's design doesn't have the same kind of impact as, say, the Essential or Samsung's recent Galaxies. Wired. The very notion of using your face as the key to your digital secrets presents some fundamental problems. It's very hard to hide your face from someone who wants to coerce you to unlock your phone, like a mugger, a customs agent, or a policeman who has just arrested you. In some cases, criminal suspects in the U.S. can invoke the Fifth Amendment protections from self-incrimination to refuse to give up their phone's passcode. That same protection doesn't apply to your face. Financial Times. All the focus today was on the innovations in the X, but it all made the new 8 look like a rather boring, plain old iPhone, and the price for that has just gone up $50 as well. TechCrunch. The X is the best iPhone, no questions, and it's quickly jumped to the top of the best phones, period. Yeah, it's going to cost you, but you already knew that. Twitter. I gaze into the iPhone and the iPhone gazes back at me. Nietzsche. At Erica Sadun. I'm not sure how the iPhone X face recognition will distinguish between me with makeup and without makeup, because the difference is real. At Condi Johnson. So if you were sleeping and your girl picks the iPhone X and puts it in your face, it just unlocks it, yeah? Lol. Thanks Apple. But no, thanks. At DRIFUNRELAO. I think the leaks spoiled the iPhone X keynote, but Apple also didn't do enough to show why augmented reality matters. At Tom Warren. The choice is simple, the iPhone X or 363 coffees. At Josh Goosen. Facebook. iPhone X has facial recognition. It'll look at your face and tell you that you can't afford it. Abhimanyu Singh. Face ID seems like an over-engineered fix that they were forced to include because they couldn't integrate a fingerprint scanner into the screen. Nick Farina. How on earth can they justify the same price in $s as in £s? Utterly shameful. I won't be buying on that basis alone. Darren Taylor. They made the 8 almost identical to the 7 so people would have to spend the extra money for the X. And I'm sure I'll buy one even though I know what they did. Patrick Michael. Reddit. Apple isn't the first in facial recognition. by a long shot, but they will without a doubt make facial recognition competitive by making it better. This is how they always work. Leprechaun. The lack of any fingerprint reader could cause problems for people who either cover their face for religious or professional reasons as well as for blind people. Really hoping Apple thought about these issues. Danius353. The iPhone home button was what made it look like a iPhone. The little round button was so iconic. Now the iPhone X looks like any other phone, really, especially if you put a case on it. I've fallen. X2, XS. What are they going to call the next one? Ultra in 195. Apple's iPhone X has the best phone display I have yet seen, and it strikes the perfect balance between phone size and display size, at least for me. When I handled the device at the Apple event at the Steve Jobs Theater in Cupertino today, I was convinced by that display alone. But the iPhone X is just as much about its new facial recognition technology as it is about the display. It was here that I had more nuanced, or even mixed, feelings while using the device. Once again, the way you interface with your phone has changed, and, at best, it's roughly as efficient to use as it used to be with some adjustment. At worst, it's a little less elegant. But, as Apple always does, let's start with the design. The back surface is glass and looks more like other iPhones you've seen. The Messages app has been augmented with a number of features that use the front-facing, 3D camera, including emojis. The volume buttons are still there. Yes, that's a lightning cable on the bottom, and no headphone jack. The display dominates the iPhone X. Web browsing in portrait mode gives you more text on the screen at once than previous iPhones. The advantages of the wider screen are less noticeable when browsing the web in landscape mode. The portrait lighting feature felt more sci-fi than anything else we tried out. 16:9 video content crops at the edges, but because the OLED shows true blacks, it just looks like there's a bezel. HDR is amazing, but it won't come through in these photos. The iPhone X is completely black on the front, and those blacks are the same even when it's on if there's nothing to show in that pixel. And emojis are a lot of fun, albeit not revolutionary. The iPhone X's screen fully covers the front of the device, almost. Samuel Axon. Apple's iPhone X has the best phone display I have yet seen, and it strikes the perfect balance between phone size and display size, at least for me. When I handled the device at the Apple event at the Steve Jobs Theater in Cupertino today, I was convinced by that display alone. But the iPhone X is just as much about its new facial recognition technology as it is about the display. It was here that I had more nuanced, or even mixed, feelings while using the device. Once again, the way you interface with your phone has changed, and, at best, it's roughly as efficient to use as it used to be with some adjustment. At worst, it's a little less elegant. But, as Apple always does, let's start with the design. Design and user experience. First, let's talk size. The iPhone X felt similar to both the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 8 in my hand. The size may be slightly different, but you probably wouldn't know it without being told. Only when holding an iPhone 7 in one hand and the iPhone X did I notice. But yes, the X is marginally larger vertically and horizontally, by 0.21 and 0.15 inches, respectively. The thickness is almost exactly the same. The display, though, is much larger. At 5.8 inches, the X's display is actually larger than the iPhone 7 Plus display. It occupies the entire front surface of the device except for a small slither at the top that houses the front-facing camera, some other hardware, and tiny bezels on the sides. That slither cuts into the display, which would be a bit odd if not for the fact that that area was usually occupied by the status bar in previous iPhones anyway. Immediately, I wanted to know if it would cut into 16:9 video. The answer is no, unless you zoomed in to make it fill the whole screen. The phone's aspect ratio, when held in landscape mode, is wider than 16:9. So that area is just black anyway. If you're an app or game developer, there's going to be some hair pulling in your future. The new aspect ratio is going to mean a lot of work for a lot of app and game devs. Again, and said ratio is now different between the iPhone 7 or 8 and the iPhone X, so you'll have to support both for the best user experience. It's the iPhone 5 all over again. Even if you're not a dev, expect a transition period just like you saw when we moved from the iPhone 4 to the 5. The iPhone X is completely black on the front, and those blacks are the same even when the X is on and there's nothing to show in that pixel. But the transition won't be as painful as the iPhone 5 if you are running an app designed for the previous phone's display. Because of the OLED display, those edges really are truly black. They blend seamlessly into the physical body of the phone. That means they look like part of a bigger bezel. Images display just like they would on the iPhone 7 or 8. With the addition of this near full-face display, we lose the home button completely and Touch ID with it. That means you can no longer log in with your fingerprint. Instead, you use your face and a swiping gesture. Swiping to unlock is back, and I'm honestly not a fan. Your iPhone X will map your face in 3 dimensions when you set it up. After that, you start up the phone and get to your home screen by simply looking at the front-facing camera and swiping up on the display from the bottom of the device. To revert to the home screen from an app, you use the same gesture from inside the app. To go to the multitasking view, you swipe halfway up the screen, then let go. I found the multitasking gesture to be a bit frustrating at first. There was no clear indication as to how far I needed to go or when I could stop. I'm sure I'd adapt eventually, but it wasn't intuitive, and you, usually, expect something more intuitive from Apple. The multitasking view looks similar to the existing one, with a series of cards descending in space horizontally across the screen. Whereas in iOS 10 on the iPhone 7 you swipe up on a card to close the app, the iPhone X running iOS 11 requires you to hold your finger down on the card so red indicators appear on all the cards. From there, I tapped them out. The multitasking view works like it did some iOS versions ago, with the red minus sign in the corner. In general, I'm not a fan of anything that requires me to hold down my finger for a while to gain a basic function. I'm not glad that's back. Other home button functions have been moved around. For example, the Apple rep said that you can take a screenshot by holding the power button and the volume button simultaneously. Previously, it was the power button and the home button. Facial recognition. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test this directly, only see it done. That's because the phone knew the face of the Apple employee demoing the product, not mine. Watching him do it, it looked fast, but, as I said previously, I'm not entirely convinced that facial recognition is preferable to the home button. Apple claims facial recognition will be substantially more secure, though. The Touch ID was probably secure enough for most people, but those working in certain fields may find the new functionality to be a positive development. The applications of this tech that the majority of people will enjoy are mostly related to photos. New filters can map 60D masks onto your face in selfies. In one of them, you can run your hand in front of your face to change masks or faces rapidly. The filter is clever, I thought, but it just felt like an extra dimension, pun not intended, on the already popular Snapchat filters in use. I was struck by the portrait lighting feature, though. The same tech that is used to map your face for authentication is also used to map the face of the subject of a photo. Using that information, it can render different lighting scenarios on the photo, either live while you're taking it, or, rather amazingly, long after the photo was taken. Portrait lighting is the one feature in the iPhone X that felt truly revolutionary to me when I used it. The devil is also in the details. I was delighted by a range of smaller features using the tech. For example, let's say you have your phone's volume or alarm cranked to maximum to make sure you hear it when it goes off. Once you pick up the phone to see who's calling or to turn off that alarm, the front-facing camera will recognize that it has your attention and reduce the volume of the ringer. Subtle but slick. And then there are the animojis, emojis that animate for your message recipient based on your facial expressions. This idea isn't new. Obviously, we've seen some similar things in Snapchat, but online games like EverQuest 2 and, more recently, Star Citizen, have been doing stuff even more similar to this for years to give in-game avatars expressiveness. Despite the new 3D face mapping tech, the animojis don't seem more sophisticated than what we've seen in games that use normal webcams. But that doesn't really matter. I'm going to be using them frequently, and most of my friends won't find them too annoying, I promise. I did draw the line at the voice animojis. You can record an audio clip of your voice along with the animoji, then send it through messages. The recipient will see a talking cartoon head with your voice. It's a tad creepy when you add in the voice to be honest. But this seems like a more natural application of the tech than online games. The emojis work perfectly, and I have every expectation based on my use of them that they'll be popular. OLED. More than the design or the facial recognitions, it was this display that set the iPhone X apart for me. If you're into number crunching, the display doesn't beat the Samsung Galaxy S8's resolution, either in number of pixels or pixels per inch. The iPhone X's display has a resolution of 2436 by 1125 at 458p. Samsung's competitor comes in at 2960 by 1440 at 571p. But the quality of the iPhone X display was still remarkable. As hard as it is to judge phone displays on a showroom floor, the color balance was lovely, and the blacks were completely black, even while the well-lit parts of photos and videos were bright enough to fight the overhead lighting in the room. The iPhone X shoots 4K and HDR video, but its display is not actually 4K. Do you really need 4K on a 5.8-inch screen though? Probably not. And, as Tim Cook said on stage today, 4K isn't nearly as impactful as HDR. HDR is, in a word, awesome. It's the most significant display development since HD, and it's notoriously difficult to explain or market. You just have to see it. It won't come through in the live streams or the photos, yet. 4K is easy to grasp, it's more pixels, so it's sharper. But what about HDR? If you want to dive deep into how HDR works, we explained it in some detail in a previous article at ours. The shortest possible version of this explanation I can give here is that HDR increases the precision and range of steps between fully black and fully white pixels. Contrast is often measured in how big the gap is between black and white, but HDR improves the specificity with which light and colors can be displayed in between. The effect is powerful, whether you're seeing it on a newer TV or the iPhone X. Of course, content is the real bottleneck with HDR right now. Most of the best HDR content right now is select games on home gaming consoles, and Ultra HD Blu-rays. Obviously, neither is usable with the iPhone X. But Apple announced today that 4K and HDR movies are coming to the iTunes Store soon, plus the library of Amazon Prime originals that are available in 4K and HDR. Apple didn't mention it, but Netflix supports HDR on some other platforms, too. And YouTube HDR just rolled out to a number of competing Android handsets, including the Pixel, Galaxy S8, LG V30, and Note 8. You can take HDR photos with this thing too, so you're as set as you could hope for in these early days. The iPhone X I used was preloaded with a bunch of HDR pictures and videos. The HDR pictures looked just as good as they would on my LG HDR OLED TV at home. One photo, in particular, a silhouette of a woman with her hair brightly lit by a backlight, eclipse style, looked like nothing you would see on the iPhone 7. The bump in resolution is nice, but I didn't really notice that part. I did notice the contrast ratio and precision that came with OLED and HDR. It's one of those I'll never go back to the old way if I can help it situations. While the design is elegant, we expected that. The X's face recognition is cool, but I didn't find it to be easier to use or much cooler than Touch ID, personally. On the other hand, I was very impressed by the screen, and I am a serious image quality enthusiast. The screen is probably going to make the iPhone X a must-buy for the most dedicated and affluent Apple users. If you're a high-end Android user, I don't know that the screen is going to be as new to you as it will be to an iPhone 6s or iPhone 7 owner. As always, the software is the most important thing. First look. Hands-on with Apple's iPhone X. Apple Insider went hands-on with Apple's newest flagship and came away impressed by the handset's fit and finish. The stainless steel band that wraps around iPhone perfectly flows into the handset's two glass slabs, a design similar to iPhone 4's glass sandwich format, albeit far more refined. As analytically anticipated, based on what we already knew before the final details were unveiled and prior to some time hands-on, iPhone X gives Apple the ability to drive sales of an even more premium smartphone, featuring specifications and capabilities that are harder, if not impossible, to launch in the mega million volumes that existing generations of iPhones currently sell at. But with the details presented in the keynote, And getting to see and feel iPhone X hands-on, this reality takes on a whole new meaning. Apple didn't just slap on a better camera and upgrade the screen resolution in order to charge more or declare a technological first. The application of an integration between all of the new iPhone X features is nothing short of phenomenal. The new Super Retina HD of iPhone X is shockingly great, with vibrant wide color and very dark blacks. But it's also perfectly integrated into the new stainless steel case design in a way that's reminiscent of how Steve Jobs described iPhone 4 as having the high-end appearance and specialized look and feel of a Leica camera. iPhone 6/6s/7 shared a nice design, but it seemed basically utilitarian. So much so that every other phone maker copied it, calling it the obvious way one had to design a phone these days. iPhone X, and to some extent iPhone 8 as well, feels like a dive back into feeling differentiated and fancy. The iPhone X Super Retina HD display is also conspicuously integrated into the True Depth camera and sensor array. When watching a movie, you can view it unobstructed or expand it to full screen, which rounds off the corners and knocks out the slot where sensors sit. The former is nothing like the flat tire of the failed Moto 360 smartwatch, which half-heartedly tried to deliver a round display and just gave up on the bottom of the screen. The black sensor array on iPhone X essentially blends away when watching video full screen. And when used as a phone, it helps differentiate between pulling down Control Center from the top right, the ear where the signal and battery meters sit, and pulling down your notifications from the center or left of the screen. This rejiggering of standard iOS gestures also helps get rid of the home button, because now you can simply swipe up to go to the home screen or swipe and hold to switch between running apps, a simple and intuitive gesture that also brings it in line with how iPads work in iOS 11. Forcing the entire installed base of iPhone users into this new way of working might cause some blowback, as the majority of people don't like change. But tying these new mechanisms to a premium phone that you have to pay extra for means that iPhone X users will effectively be asking for the new behavior, rather than being pushed into it. The other features tied to the home button, Touch ID authentication and Apple Pay, are now triggered by the side button, bringing iPhone X payments in line with how it works on Apple Watch. This also enables Face ID as a rapid way to authenticate without a fingerprint sensor. This also helps explain why Apple never implemented some of the features that could have been attached to the Touch ID sensor, such as using it as a pointing device with finger gestures. Apple knew it wanted to eventually get rid of Touch ID and reclaim the home button real estate. In one leap, that home button migration is now done, at least for buyers opting into Apple's future phone. For everyone else, Touch ID continues to work the way it has. It remains to be seen what percentage of iPhone users will opt into these new ways of working. On one hand, there are changes to get used to and significant additional upfront expense. On the other hand, these changes are insanely great, enable other super cool features, such as animate emoji or Animoji, which are incredibly fun to use, and actually simplify how iOS works. Apple may have a hard time building enough trickle-down X tech. The iPhone 6, 6s and 7s generations each sold around 170 million units in their first year. There simply is no source on Earth capable of supplying 170 million good-quality OLED screens within a year, nor can any vendor afford to produce and sell that many 3D depth sensors. The add-on occipital structure sensor for iPad and the rare Android device supporting Google's Project Tango all shipped in volumes far short of 1 million. However, by offering a premium-priced iPhone X, Apple can introduce a mainstream 3D True Depth sensor and Super Retina HD OLED display for its premium-hungry audience, and build both into an extremely high-quality device that looks premium and feels ultra-luxurious. This was so obvious we could observe it before even looking at iPhone X up close, or having a completed list of its features. Perhaps less obvious is the fact that the premium $999 and up price of iPhone X will not only fund the development, implementation and fabrication of features like the new True Depth sensor and Super Retina HD, but will also help pay for other new features that are shared with its more mainstream cousins, iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. Some new X features shared across the board include its impressive build quality, including the glass back that enables Qi wireless charging and makes the latest base model iPhone 8 options look like iPhone 7's jet black on steroids, and in 3 different colors of gloss, silver, space gray and gold. All models also share Apple's super-fast A11 Bionic chip, as once you design advanced silicon logic, the more chips you fab the less they cost. So sharing the part between both 8 and X product lines allows Apple to also enhance portrait mode and its dynamic, non-destructive lighting features across all of its 2017 iPhone releases. iPhone X additionally enables portrait mode selfies, using its True Depth technology. Everyone who has used portrait mode on iPhone 7 Plus already knows how great it would be to have that same kind of technology improving their selfies and front-facing group shots as it already does for their photos of kids and pets, and any inanimate objects that need some heightened drama for Instagram. Apple's A11 Bionic GPU. Apple's new A11 Bionic chip is a major leap in both processing power and efficiency, enabling that huge new expansion of portrait mode photography, which became one of the most popular and impressive features of last year's iPhone 7 Plus. The new chip also drives the responsiveness of upcoming ARKit apps and games, in part because it includes Apple's proprietary new GPU for accelerating graphics, a feat we weren't certain Apple could pull off so soon. The Apple GPU is one of the biggest announcements of the event, but it got the least applause simply because the public doesn't yet fully recognize how important this is right now and into the future. Apple was already leading in mobile devices, particularly in gaming and the smoothness of iOS UI, simply because it had selected the best available third-party GPU designs, in contrast to Android and Windows phones that were content with more basic graphics. But now Apple has its own in-house GPU technology, and has the ability to tightly optimize its products to achieve even greater differentiating capabilities. Note that GPU cores aren't limited to accelerating graphics but are also increasingly being used to plow through tons of specialized math, such as in machine learning and artificial intelligence. The billions of dollars Apple is investing in GPU technology will further widen the gulf we've seen grow between $650 iPhones and average Android phones that now sell for less than $300 via more basic commodity components. But Apple's proprietary GPU technology will also trickle down to mobile devices such as Apple Watch, where the state-of-the-art in $650 and up smartphone technology has already started driving tomorrow's scaled-down micro devices and appliances like Apple TV 4K and the new HomePod. Qualcomm and other mobile chip vendors have lots of Android phone makers to sell their chips to, but those makers are not capable of selling high-end devices in iPhone-like quantities. Further, they're also not selling significant numbers of ultra-mobile devices such as smartwatches. That means that even if Qualcomm were to develop advanced high-end GPUs and super-efficient watch chips, it wouldn't have buyers to sell them in volume. And because volume is such a huge factor in overall pricing, to spread out the cost of initial development, there's a catch-22 in place that serves to maintain the status quo in Android land of serving the low-end and medium tiers where smartphones only need to be good enough.